I am Helena Montez, 35 years old, and I am the pulse behind the numbers, the careful hand behind the steady rise of a bank that never sleeps. And I will tell you the day I chose love, and the day I learned that justice can be colder than a wintry wind, and twice as sharp when you mean to win the future by the weight of your own secrets and the truth you refuse to blink at any longer. I walk the trading floor with the air of someone who has learned to hold a storm inside her ribcage, and I know every corner of the building, every echo of a deal that bites and heals at once. My hidden ambition is not to be liked or to win a popularity contest. It is to remake the rules of power so that they finally bend toward fairness, toward a system where sharp minds are not punished for choosing to rise, and where loyalty is not a one-way street for the weak and the compliant, but a mutual contract that binds the strong to a higher purpose. I am Montez. And by the time this story ends, the city will know my name not as a whisper, but as a verdict, delivered with the cool precision of a well-executed plan. The personal frame for this episode is a man who walked into my life with the velvet of romance and the blade of ambition, hidden behind a smile that could persuade the most cautious investor to trust him with a future he did not deserve. We met in the late glow of an autumn evening. A fundraiser where the city wore its wealth like a badge, and I wore the look of someone who knew exactly what she would take from that night, without losing the person who stood across from me. He spoke of partnership, not merely partnership in the boardroom, but partnership in life, a shared dream of a larger stage where our hands could shape more than balance sheets. He proposed not in a dusty conference room, but on a rooftop that looked over the sleeping river, where the air smelled of rain and possibility, and the city lights wove a halo around us, as if to bless the moment with a sense that fate favored the brave. I said yes, because his eyes told me that desire could be a ladder, and I wanted to climb. I did not see the hidden gears turning behind the smile. The way he measured every gesture I made, as if he were balancing risk in his mind, the same way I balanced risk in the markets. I did not realize that love in a suite above the street can become a trap for lovers who mistake passion for partnership for a plan that has nothing to do with us and everything to do with them. The days after the rooftop promise felt like stepping into a new currency whose value depended entirely on trust. And trust in this case was a currency I spent with care, because I had learned long ago that trust is a fragile thing that can be weaponized with a single misread glance. We signed a life together with the same ceremony that seals a merger. A vow to share both the heat of dawn and the cold of night, and I believed that his warmth was a signal of truth, not a mask. But the first snags showed up in the quiet hours after he began to jockey for access to my calendar, for the right to speak for us during a pitch meeting that would decide whether we merged two worlds or destroyed them both. I caught the flicker of a plan behind his eyes, the way he began to surface in places I trusted to be mine alone. A suggestion that he could be the shield around my ambition while I became the blade that severed the ties that would have restrained him. The affair he carried, the half-whispered rumors, the way a key would appear in the wrong pocket at the right moment, all of it whispered that we were not partners in a future, but players in a game with too many hidden doors. And then came the moment I realized that his love was a chandelier in a room of truth, dazzling and dangerous, casting reflections on glass that could hide misdeeds if you refused to look long enough. The fracture came not with a shouted confession, but with a courtroom silence that fell over every room we entered, a hush that felt like the moment before the storm, when you know the wind is not waiting for you to make a choice, but is already making it for you. The revelations did not arrive as dramatic headlines during a press conference, but in the careful, ledgered disclosures that landed like coins on a scale. A series of off-balance sheet bets, a set of side arrangements that carved out a private space where he could profit while I carried the public weight of our name. The betrayal did not break me all at once. It crept through the joints of trust. A cold draft that went straight for the heart of what I believed a relationship could be. He had told me that love could be a sanctuary and a strategy at the same time. And I, in the quiet hours of the late night with the city sighing beneath my window, began to understand that sanctuary can also be a vault, and strategy can hollow out a heart. My plan to withstand this was not built on revenge alone, but on the iron discipline I had hammered into myself since I was a girl, who learned to count every dent in a street, to know where the next opportunity lay. I did not respond with a scream or a surrender. I responded with a plan that needed to be executed with the cool hands of someone who had learned to read the seasons of markets and the seasons of people with equal patience. The boardroom that will forever be etched into my memory did not feel like a chamber of judgment at first. It felt like a stage where my life would be re-scripted in real time. The room smelled of coffee and old money. The air thick with the adrenaline of decision. He stood at my side as my partner in life and in business, a man who believed his charm could buy him access to power and my eventual complicity in his schemes. I paused at the entrance, listening to the soft hum of the lights and the distant murmur of the city outside the tall windows. And I thought about all the nights I spent learning to hold my own against men who believed a woman who could count to 1 billion was not built to hold a chair hand in hand with them. When the moment came to speak, I did not shout. I spoke with the precise cadence of someone who had spent years learning to calibrate her voice to bend to the truth without breaking it. I laid out every discrepancy I had found, every hidden column of sums that should have been flagged and never were, every promise that did not match the ledger. And then I did something he had not anticipated. Something that made the room tilt in a way that reminded me of a market crash I had survived as a girl. I turned the couple I had built into the instrument of my own independence. I said I would not be the shield he wore to his ambitions, and I would not be the casualty when his plans collapsed under their own weight. I asked for the dissolution of our marriage with the same calm voice I used when I asked for a loan approval on a bad loan day. I asked for a clean separation of assets, a severing of trust, and a designation of his role in the company to be terminated in the most orderly manner possible. The room listened with the careful attention of a jury, and I watched the flicker of fear in his eyes as he realized that his years of soft influence could no longer shelter him from the repercussions of his own actions. The board did not need to hear every sordid detail, but they did need to see the pattern clearly. This was not a man who had the bank's best interests at heart. This was a man who had mistaken my presence in his life for the tar that would hold him in place. A man who believed my loyalty could be rented to guard his own ascent. Justice, in this moment, was not a melodramatic scene, but a procedural hymn to truth and the ruthless clarity of consequence. They voted slowly and deliberately to dissolve the partnership, to remove him from his executive duties, to reallocate his shares, to ensure that any future claims would be settled with the clean ledger of a company that would not be dragged by the ankles through a public spectacle. As the gavel fell, the air shifted in a way that felt almost spiritual, as if the room itself exhaled and released a pressure I had learned to live with, a pressure that once threatened to crush me under its weight, and instead became the same force that pushed me toward a new throne. In the minutes after, the people who had doubted me suddenly found themselves offering me their respect, as if they had been trying to prove something to themselves by testing me, and found in me the living proof that a woman who carries a plan can turn her own heart into an engine for change. The personal victory became corporate momentum, and I realized that the division of our lives was the first stroke of a broader reorganization of power that would soon reset the balance of influence in the bank. It was not simply about him losing a title or about me gaining more control. It was about creating a future where a woman who chose to love could still choose to lead, could still command the respect of a room full of men who believed she belonged to a recipe of patience and subservience rather than to one of fearless calculation. The room darkened around the edges as the sunset spilled into the glass, painting the walls with the color of coins and decision. And I could feel the weight of a crowd watching a chapter end while 1,000 more chapters waited to begin. Outside, the city breathed in its own steady rhythm, and I walked back through the hallways. My suit did not tremble, my voice did not crack, and my eyes did not betray the storm within. I felt for a moment the soft ache of what I had lost, the future I had imagined with him, the quiet mornings that would now only live in memory, the private plans we had crafted that would never come to light again. Yet I also felt something cooler and clearer than sorrow, the blade edge of resolve, the certainty that I would not be measured by the